So I'm here to talk to you today about the Earth and Space Sustainability Initiative, which has been my pleasure and privilege to be involved with for most of this year, certainly since the spring. Let me see if I can get the tech working and share my screen. There we go. So yes, the Earth and Space Sustainability Initiative. Well, earlier in the year, I'm sure a number of you were aware of the King's Astra Carta initiative. And it's here that we see the King and his quote that he gave at that time. And this is very interesting because there seems to be a lot of people thinking in the same direction at the moment. How do we use space in a sustainable way? Coming from that astrophysics background, it was obviously of great concern to me, the concept of losing our dark skies and our ability to be able to perform science effectively. But the more I've looked into this, the more I realize that there is so much more at stake than just the science that we might lose by that. And on this first slide here, I just think we can very broadly split the need for a sustainable approach to using space into two different categories, really. One is a sort of an ethical and a moral imperative. You know, we've been given minds that are capable of understanding the consequences of our actions and looking out at the universe or the wider world here on Earth and understanding that in a scientific way. So it's surely within what we should be doing is to look at the consequences of using space and putting satellites up there. And then there's just a harshly practical side of all of that. Is we have this quote here from the insurance company AXA of a frighteningly large number of registrations for radio frequencies for just a huge number of satellites. And so just as I say, in a terms of practical way, how are we going to manage all of that? And how are we also going to ensure that everybody can do what they want to do in space, but not infringe what other people want to do as well? So this is really where the Earth and Space Sustainability Initiative comes from. This is the impetus for it, is to understand all the different uses that we want to make with space. Now, those uses can be, in a way, active, or they can be passive. In the sense of being active, it's actually going into space either with hardware, even with people, and just making it a place of work, if you like. And then there's the more passive aspects, which is just enjoying the night sky. It literally comes down to just an individual mental well-being basis of being able to either use the night sky for astronomy purposes or just the pleasure of being under a starry night sky. And that's before we get to cultures that still use the night sky for timekeeping and wayfinding things as well. So how are we going to do all of this? And in the next sort of 10 minutes or so, let me try and unpack what our approach is to you. We believe that the best way to do this, and I'll go into the reasons for why in the next couple of slides, is that if we can develop a set of space sustainability principles that can then be used by the British Standards Institute to develop a set of internationally recognized standards for how we might go about the various different aspects of using space, then we have a metric, an agreed standard in which we can all measure ourselves, and people who wish to do things in space, they have a framework within which to work, to know the boundaries of what they can and can't do, and what good practice looks like. And before we go any further at all, I want to say a very big thank you and pay tribute to the UK Space Agency for believing in this project and funding us through the Space Sustainability Team and their efforts this whole year. Thank you very much indeed. Now, to ensure that we all get out of ESSI something that's transparent, fair, and inclusive, we're a crucible that's trying to bring together, obviously, the global space industry. On top of that, finance and insurance communities, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. We also, of course, want the input of the IT and definitely all the academia people as well. It's crucial that we reach other governments, regulators, and policymakers to make this stick. International organizations that are outside of the governments and regulators, and then the public across the world, because we have to be inclusive. I think we have to understand exactly what people value about the night sky and what they think about the fact that we are changing space, especially the orbital space around the Earth, into effectively a human environment. And my journey into this really began a few years ago, actually. And I was writing a piece about the biological protection of other planets. It was triggered by the Mars sample return missions and this idea of contaminating either Mars with Earth bacteria, or the faint possibility of bringing something from Mars back. And I was talking to Thomas Cheney at the Open University. And he said something that absolutely stuck with me. And he said he effectively thought it was time that we stopped thinking of space as sort of a remote place and these celestial realms as just wholly different from the Earth, and started thinking of them as environments in their own right. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized just what a correct approach that is. So the orbital space around the Earth has its own set of resources, which are scarce. The spectrum of that we use, the frequency spectrum that we use to communicate with our satellites there, the physical space that they take up, all of these are precious resources that need understanding and regulating. The driving force behind the Earth and Space Sustainability Initiative is Joanne Wheeler, the lawyer from Alden Legal. And she has worked in space her entire career. I'm sure she's known to many of you on this conference. And the catalyst for her was when the United Nations published their guidelines on the long-term sustainability of outer space activities. And these are a fabulous set of guidelines. But as we heard in the previous the earlier part of this morning, space is changing very, very quickly. The landscape moves fast. And there was a thought that some of these guidelines might be going out of use and be a bit old-fashioned, even when they were soon after they were published, because of the pace at which space is changing. And also the fact that they were guidelines as well, so not legally binding. And if we're going to create lasting change, then we need something that's international and binding in some way. And that's why the concept of standards came to mind. So this is very much a slide that paints the perfect world scenario that we're trying to move towards. We can drive this sustainable behavior only if it's sort of implemented consistently at national level. So across the world, there's this level playing field. So a big question that we face is not only how do we decide what these standards should be, but also how can we best implement them to influence, enable commercial activities and sort of drive what is called this race to the top, so that we have companies who feel able to do what they want in space, but also they're incentivized to do it in a way that doesn't affect the use of space for others. There is such a big appetite for understanding what space sustainability looks like at the moment. And one of the things that we have realized is that in the insurance and the finance industries, this is key. Sustainability is absolutely key to the companies they want to work with. And so if you can get insurance, it then makes it easier to raise finance. Finance is looking very much at the environmental, social, and governance criteria, the ESG criteria. And so if we could build those kinds of criteria into these, into our principles and then into the standards, then we hope that that will allow people to know the boundaries within which to work, and that investors themselves and the insurance market feel comfortable with. So in defining this organization, here is our mission statement. This is really just a summary of everything that I've been telling you. We realize keenly that there's no putting this genie back into the bottle. The cost of launch and getting into space and using space is dropping all the time. Innovation in what we can do with space-based data is exploding, and so we have to find a way of guiding that in this sustainable way. We are very lucky as well that the British Standards Institute is almost formally on board. The Space Agency are doing the final bits of negotiation with the BSI for us, and I'll talk about the first two standards that we have going through the system in a few slides' time. And the BSI will engage with ISO from day one, and also with their contacts at the various standard agencies around the world in the Commonwealth from day one as well. So we feel as if we have a reasonably good chance at global reach for this work that we're doing straight away. What we want to do, the way to make this work, is not for us to sit sort of in our ivory towers and tell people what to do, but it's to bring everyone together. And there will be I'll give you the email address at the end of this. Any of you who are listening today and want to be more involved in our committees and our working groups for the various standards that we're doing, I welcome your contact. So we want to bring all this expertise from all these different industries together, and then engage as well across nations. So through the various different channels, we already have about 10 nations that have expressed interest in following whatever approach we come up with. On Monday, for example, the SE team was assisting Space Agency and Innovate UK in bringing together a delegation from the African nations to learn about their space ambitions and how they might fit, and this work might fit into their approach. At very early stages at the moment, but if we're going to have carrots to give out to industry, in the sense that recognition and following these standards will allow them to talk to finance and industry. Well, that's the carrot. At some stage, we're also going to need some sort of enforcement and appellate body to make sure that these standards can be enforced. And at the moment, the idea, and as I say, this is an idea only, but that would not be a UK based, but somewhere in the Commonwealth to increase the global reach of what we're doing. We are very aware and very pleased that there are just so many other people, organizations and companies that are thinking along these lines. And we welcome all these different approaches, because the more people that are thinking about this, what space sustainability looks like, how we encourage it, how we enforce it, what best practice is in these regards, the more likely we are to come up with the correct solutions. And where we feel that SE can bring value is that we want to look at the entire life cycle of spacecraft and the use of outer space. So we're very well aware that there are a number of other organizations that are looking at parts of this problem. And so we are complementary with those other initiatives, and yet unique in that we try to be the crucible that brings it all together. We have some key objectives here. As I've said, the biggest one is that we cover the entire life cycle of a satellite. This, we hope, will allow us to have companies can attract wider investment. By following the standards, it provides transparency and confidence to investors. And as we say, you can read the rest. I've talked to you about these things as well. So it's about enabling industry without compromising any of the other uses that we have for space. To stick our toe in the water and to see what level of interest we might have in all of this. Back in the early summer, we started working on a very top-level memorandum of principles for space sustainability. And this was to gauge academic and industrial reaction to what we were doing. To gain their input, we consulted widely for about a 3-week period in June. And out of that, we produced a memorandum of principles for space sustainability that was signed by 132 space companies, academic institutions, members of the finance and insurance communities, and organizations across all domains. And this has given us very much the confidence to continue down this line of work, because it's proven to us that that many different people and bodies are willing to engage with us and find workable solutions. So the Memorandum of Principles is published on our website, esi.org, essi.org. We are still open for more signatures. Anyone who wishes to review the memorandum, then please have a look on the website and contact us. So this is really the body of what we now have stretching ahead of us to do. The framework principle is essentially takes the memorandum of principles from June and enshrines it in a standard. It's very top level. It points in the directions that we want to go and sets the stage for the other standards that come underneath it. Spacecraft design, manufacture and propulsion, launch, supporting operations in space and space weather, rendezvous and proximity operations, supporting end of life and disposal, space debris mitigation, dark skies, quiet skies and spectrum sustainability, then Earth monitoring and resource management. It's a lot of work, and we are absolutely dependent on academic and industrial partners to help us do this work. So once again, like a broken record, I'm going to say anybody who likes the look of any of those, please contact us, and we can get you involved. So the first two standards that we have now with the BSI for them to start their work are the framework, as I've just talked about, and then the launch standard as well. And it's here as well that we have great collaboration from DFT, and obviously DCIT are also involved in everything that we do. We have weekly meetings to try and keep us all aligned and pulling in the same direction. These now sit with the BSI, who will begin their work on transforming them into what they call flex standards. Flex standards are a route to get a standard published quickly, but then iterate it over the course of 18 months to 2 years, with a large industrial and academic consultation experiment, so that we can truly see how they work and get them into, as quickly as possible, a workable form. So we hope that these first two standards will be published early next year, and that then starts the process of iteration. Communications is a key part of what we're doing here, and communications to us is not simply a megaphone in which we tell you what we're doing, but it's very much a two-way street. And as I've said, we have been very much encouraged at how much engagement that we have got, and we seek more of it. We want to drive these conversations about space sustainability in 3 different directions: with the space industry, academia, financial and insurance communities, through governmental and regulators, and then out to the general public as well. And fingers crossed, if all goes well, we hope to ramp up all 3 aspects of this communication by a large proportion next year. This needs to be, as I've said, a truly international effort. We are hosting an international workshop at the UN UNIDIR in March next year. That will be in Geneva, and then a follow-up will be done in an African country in September. There is huge engagement with COPUS to tell other countries about the work, and we also are beginning our engagement with several indigenous peoples across the globe, because what we have discovered in the work that we have done with them so far is that their concepts of indigenous knowledge is really just a mindset for approaching sustainable use of the environment. So we have an awful lot to learn about their approach to this, and also about what they value about the night skies. Finally, on a practical level, we undertook an analysis of what standards they existed already in the space sector, thinking that perhaps it was a couple of hundred across the world. In fact, we've identified over 1,000 standards that are relatable to space at national and international level. We've collated these, and we're in the process of turning those into a searchable database that will go online next year. So this is the final slide, and this is our sort of philosophical underpinnings there. The night sky is our constant. We look at the same stars as everybody else in the world, but also the same stars in the same configuration as every other person ever lived. They're our constant touchstone. Culturally, they inspire us, and they speak of permanence and of a sense of the wider stability of the universe. And that means that now we have effectively transformed that into, or if we are effectively transforming that into a human environment where what we do here affects what happens out there. We have this responsibility. It is now part of our ecosystem. And so it's a privilege to be in this position, to actually be making and living through this historic change. And we believe that it therefore is the right thing to do, to think about the consequences of all of that. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. Apologize once again for not being there in person. I was looking forward very much to the kinds of conversations that always happen at the conference. But please either drop a line, contact@esi.org, or directly to me, stuart.clark@esi.org, or find me on LinkedIn or through my Expanded Universe Company's webpage. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I think we have time for one quick question.
Thank you, Stuart. This is David Parker. Thanks for a fantastic talk, very thought-provoking and philosophically interesting talk. But there's a but coming, you can tell, which is the UK is kind of world's number 9 or 10 space power. The 3 principal space powers are the US, China, and SpaceX. So unless they're engaged in this process, and you talked about enforceability, is China or the US going to submit to a power above them as far as enforceability is concerned? Maybe I'm missing something here.
No, you're not missing anything, David. And as always, you're on the money. This is hitting the nail on the head time. We are completely aware of the uphill struggle, that this that we're taking on here. The good news is SpaceX. I say the good news. SpaceX are not one of the signatories to the Memorandum of Principles, but the good news is they are engaged with us. And so we also have engagement with many US companies, satellite operators as well. There are many US satellite operators that have signed up to the Memorandum of Principles. We are yet to make good inroads into Asia and China. We are working very hard to do that. So we don't have all the solutions. We don't have the clear path into the future yet, but we have enough engagement that it makes us willing to keep going down the road.